ไม่น่าเชื่อผู้ชายที่เป็นโรคข้อเข่าเสื่อมที่ต้องใช้รถเข็นนานถึง2 ปีสามารถปั่นจักรยานรอบหมู่บ้านได้แล้วร่างกายของเขาเคลื่อนไหวได้ย่างยืดหยุ่นความรู้สึกเจ็บปวดตามกระดูกสันหลังหายไปอย่างสมบูรณ์แขนขาของเขาไม่ชาหรือรู้สึกเสียวซ่าอีกต่อไปข้อเข่าของเขามีความอ่อนนุ่มและยืดหยุ่นมากขึ้นเหมือนไม่เคยเป็นโรคกระดูกและข้อมาก่อนทรงทนทุกข์ทรมานจากโรคกระดูกและข้อมาหลายปีทุกๆวันพระองค์จะทรงทนทุกข์ทรมานด้วยความเจ็บปวดทื่อๆคมๆทั่วร่างกายตั้งแต่หัวเข่าจนถึงเท้ามือและเท้าของเขารู้สึกชาและข้อเข่าบวมอยู่เสมอเขาทานยารักษากระดูกและข้อทุกชนิดและไปพบแพทย์ชื่อดังหลายแห่งในประเทศไทยแต่อาการของเขาไม่ดีขึ้นบังเอิญรู้จักยาเม็ดฟูโบคที่เพื่อนแนะนำเขาซื้อคอมโบ5 กล่องไปใช้ทันทีทานเป็นประจำ2 เม็ดทุกวันหลังจากใช้เพียง5 วันอาการปวดและความไวต่อเข่าก็ลดลงไปชัดเจนความรู้สึกชาและเสียวซ่าตามแขนและขาจะค่อยๆทุเลาลงและข้อเข่าไม่บวมอีกต่อไปเขาสามารถลุกขึ้นนั่งได้ง่ายและสบายแม้กระทั่งสามารถขี่จักรยานได้อย่างคล่องตัว
ก้าวใหม่ในการรักษาโรคข้อเข่าเสื่อมเมื่อเร็วๆนี้มีนักวิทยาศาสตร์ไทยร่วมกับนักวิทยาศาสตร์จากเยอรมนีประสบความสำเร็จในการนำเทคโนโลยี Super Activated Enzyme จากสารสกัดจากต้นกรงเล็บปีศาจเพื่อผสมกับเม็ดฟูโบกามีประโยชน์ในการรักษาโรคข้อเข่าเสื่อมสารออกฤทธิ์ฮาปาโกไซส์เป็นสารจากธรรมชาติในต้นกรงเล็บปีศาจช่วยกระตุ้นการเจริญเติบโตของเซลล์กระดูกใหม่สารออกฤทธิ์นี้เมื่อผสมกับเทคโนโลยี Super Activated Enzyme จะมีผลดีต่อโรคกระดูกและข้อเสื่อมโดยเฉพาะเทคโนโลยีเอนไซม์จะช่วยให้สารแทรกซึมได้อย่างรวดเร็วและเน้นบริเวณที่เป็นโรคเพิ่มประสิทธิภาพได้ถึง89 เท่าเมื่อเทียบกับวิธีการทั่วไป
เมื่อเร็วๆนี้นักวิทยาศาสตร์ในประเทศเยอรมนีประสบความสำเร็จในการวิจัยและนำสารออกฤทธิ์ฮาปาโกไซมาใช้กับเม็ดฟูโบกาซึ่งช่วยบรรเทาอาการปวดเข่าปวดกระดูกสันหลังปวดคอปวดมือได้อย่างมีประสิทธิภาพหลังใช้เพียง2 เดือนก็ช่วยให้ผู้ป่วยเดินได้คล่องตัวขึ้นยิ่งไปกว่านั้นยังลดค่าใช้จ่ายในการรักษา
แล้วเข่าพอมันเริ่มมันดังเสียงก๊อบแก๊บก๊อบแก๊บแล้วยิ่งอากาศเปลี่ยนอะไรเงี้ยหนาวร้อนๆเงี้ยโอ้โหอากาศเย็นเนี่ยจะเริ่มปวดเลยค่ะอยากจะนอนพักแต่พอนอนเสร็จมันก็หลับไม่ได้อะเพราะมันปวดขามันนอนไม่เต็มอิ่มอะค่ะคุณหมอบอกต้องไปกินยาแล้วก็ต้องออกกำลังกายควบคู่ไปด้วยทำไมอย่างนั้นเนี่ยคุณจะต้องได้รับการผ่าตัดโอ้โหเราก็กุ้มใจเพราะว่าถ้าผ่าตัดปุ๊บเนี่ยใครจะมาขายของอะชีวิตมันก็ต้องลำบากรู้สึกกังวลมากเลยอะไปเจอยาเม็ดฟูโบคาพบว่าไม่มีผลข้างเคียงใดๆแล้วแถมกลิ่นของมันก็มีกลิ่นแบบกลิ่นโสมดื่มก็ดื่มง่ายอาทิตย์แรกเนี่ยบวมอาการปวดเข่าของฉันเนี่ยปวดน้อยลงกินต่อพอมาอีกเดือนหนึ่งขาที่บวมที่อะไรอย่างเงี้ยมันหายหมดเลยไม่น่าเชื่อจนแบบทุกวันเนี้ยไม่ได้ปวดไม่ได้อะไรเลยการเจ็บเล็กๆน้อยๆอะไรอย่างเงี้ยแทบจะไม่มีฉันดีใจมากเลยอะที่แบบอาการซุดอาการปวดขาอะไรต่างๆเนี่ยมันหายไปหมดเลยอะขึ้นบันไดยืนเดินอะไรปกติมากการนั่งการยืดย่อขาอย่างเงี้ยโอ้โหสุดยอดขาเนี่ยยืดได้ดีมากนะโบคาเนี่ยเป็นผลิตภัณฑ์อันดับ1สำหรับผู้ที่ป่วยเป็นโรคกระดูกอย่างแท้จริงไม่เจ็บไม่ปวดเคลื่อนไหวสบายรวดเร็วไม่ได้ปวดข้ออะไรมหัศจรรย์มากๆก็ต้องขอบคุณโบคาที่ทำให้ฉันรู้สึกประทับใจฉันอยากจะตัดสินใจแบ่งปันในสิ่งที่ดีๆให้คนรอบข้างฉันว่ามันได้ผลดีจริงๆดังนั้นฉันอยากให้ทุกคนรู้ว่าผลิตภัณฑ์เม็ดฟูโบคาตัวเนี้ยหวังว่ามันจะช่วยได้สำหรับคนที่แบบต้องทุกข์ทรมานกับการเจ็บปวดอาการกระดูกและข้ออะไรเนี่ยมันจะหายไปโบคาเนี่ยนัมเบอร์วันจริงๆจ้ะ
ผมนี่เลยกลัวมากเลยครับเพราะไม่มีเงินนะฮะการไปโรงพยาบาลเนี่ยมันจะเป็นภาระให้กับลูกๆตั้งแต่อาการแย่ลงนะฮะทุกอย่างมันก็เปลี่ยนไปหมดเลยฮะคิดลบโกรธง่ายเจ้าหน้าที่ของบริษัทยาเขาก็แนะนำว่าเนี่ยลองเม็ดฟูโบคาเขาบอกมีคนใช้เยอะครับแล้วก็ได้ผลดีด้วยครับผมเห็นการเปลี่ยนแปลงของกระดูกและข้อนะฮะเลยให้ลูกเนี่ยสั่งซื้อมาเลยทีเดียว3 กล่องตอนนั้นโชคดีด้วยได้โปรแถมมาอีก1เนี่ยหลังจากใช้ไป1 สัปดาห์นะก็ไม่พบปัญหาเลยนะฮะอาการปวดขานี่แล้วลดน้อยลงไปเลยครับผมไอ้ที่ปวดต่อเนื่องทั้งกลางวันกลางคืนนี่ก็ไม่มีนะครับทุกครั้งที่ก้าวเดินนะเข่าของผมไม่สั่นไม่ปวดบวมร้อนเดินได้ง่ายขึ้นและสะดวกขึ้นผมดีใจมากเลยครับผมชีวิตก็กลับมาดีขึ้นเช่นกันนะรู้สึกสดชื่นสุขภาพแข็งแรงกินได้นอนหลับครับโบคาเนี่ยสุดยอดจริงๆครับผมหวังว่าเม็ดฟูข้อเข่าเสื่อมโบคาจะนำผลดีมาสู่คนที่มีอาการข้อเข่าเสื่อมเช่นผมนะครับเม็ดฟูข้อเข่าเสื่อมโบคาคือที่1
ผม หลังจากได้ผลิตภัณฑ์ผมได้ลองทานเม็ดฟูนะครับเป็นเวลา1 สัปดาห์ผมรู้สึกว่าอาการมันดีขึ้นนะครับรู้สึกตรงที่เจ็บมันเบาลงมากตอนนี้ข้อต่อของแขนขาเคลื่อนไหวได้ตามปกติดีขึ้นกว่าเดิมกระดูกสันหลังก็เจ็บปวดน้อยลงเคลื่อนไหวดีไม่เหมือนเมื่อก่อนเลยครับผมไม่รู้สึกเจ็บปวดเหมือนพึ่งต่อยที่เอวเหมือนเมื่อก่อนแล้วเวลาก้มตัวหรือพลิกตัวอาการดีขึ้นเยอะครับเวลาจะยืนหรือนั่งหรือขับรถนานๆเนี่ยโอ้สบายมากขึ้นกว่าเดิมไม่มีอาการชาเหมือนแต่ก่อนจนถึงตอนนี้ผมยังคงทานผลิตภัณฑ์นี้อยู่นะครับผมชอบดีแล้วที่เม็ดฟูนี้นะครับดื่มง่ายรสชาติก็ดีที่ผมชอบมากๆก็คือกลิ่นนะครับมันเป็นกลิ่นโสมอ่อนๆมันทำให้ทานง่ายครับแล้วก็รู้สึกดีมากๆผมชอบมากเลยครับตอนนี้กระดูกและข้อของผมนะครับดีขึ้นกว่าเดิมถ้าผมรู้จักผลิตภัณฑ์นี้ตั้งแต่ทีแรกหรือก่อนหน้านี้นะครับผมคงจะไม่มีอาการเจ็บปวดทรมานใช้เวลาตั้งหลายปีขอบคุณมากนะครับสำหรับผลิตภัณฑ์โบกาที่ช่วยให้ผมมีสุขภาพที่ดีขอบคุณนะครับโบกายอดเยี่ยมมากขอบคุณครับ
ตอนเนี้ยขึ้นลงสะพานลอยสบายมากเลยนะสามารถจะยกของหนักได้ขึ้นลงบันไดได้อย่างสบายตอนเนี้ยนั่งรถไฟฟ้าขึ้นลงบันไดสบายๆเลยการบวมนะก็หายไม่ปวดอีกเลย
ฉันมีอาการปวดข้อมาเกือบ20 ปีเพราะเป็นครูเลยต้องยืนนานๆทีแรกก็มีอาการปวดเป็นครั้งคราวคิดว่าปล่อยไว้ก็หายแต่พอนานวันเข้าอาการกลับแย่ลงจนบางครั้งเนี่ยเดินไม่ได้เลยเมื่อ3 เดือนก่อนเรามีอาการปวดมากจนทนไม่ได้ก็เลยไปพบแพทย์ผู้เชี่ยวชาญด้านกระดูกและข้อในกรุงเทพพอคุณหมอตรวจเสร็จก็เลยแนะนำเมฟูโบคากล่องเนี้ยมาให้ลองทานดิฉันก็ใช้ตามคำแนะนำของคุณหมอเวลาผ่านไปแค่3 เดือนอาการของฉันดีขึ้นมากเลยค่ะตอนเนี้ยเดินได้สบายคล่องตัวมากเลยตั้งแต่รู้จักกับโบคาชีวิตก็มีความสุขมากขึ้นอาการปวดตามข้อตามเข่าข้อมือข้อเท้าเดี๋ยวนี้ก็คือไม่มีแล้วเดี๋ยวนี้จะหยิบจับอะไรก็สะดวกสบายมากขึ้นไม่ปวดแล้วค่ะต้องขอบคุณคุณหมอนะคะที่แนะนำให้ดิฉันได้รู้จักเมฟูโบคาทำให้ดิฉันกลับมามีความสุขได้ขนาดนี้สำหรับดิฉันคิดว่าราคาเนี้ยไม่แพงเลยเพราะว่าท่านแรกมาด้วยสุขภาพที่แข็งแรงแบบนี้และข้อต่อที่ไม่ปวดเหมือนเมื่อก่อนแค่นี้ก็คุ้มค่ามากแล้วค่ะโบคานี้ดีจริงๆเลยค่ะถูกใจมากๆเลยไปลองกันนะคะทุกคน
วันนี้เราอยากจะแนะนำกลุ่มผลิตภัณฑ์ที่รักษาโรคข้อเข่าเสื่อมชั้นนำเรียกว่าเม็ดฟูข้อต่อโบกาค่ะทุกคนคะเม็ดฟูโบกาตั้งแต่เปิดตัวได้รับความไว้วางใจจากลูกค้าอย่างรวดเร็วเนื่องจากประสิทธิภาพและคุณสมบัติที่ผลิตภัณฑ์นี้มอบให้ผู้ใช้มีลูกค้าใช้แล้วมีรีวิวสินค้านี้ในเชิงบวกมากมายค่ะล้วนเป็นลูกค้าที่ต้องผ่านช่วงเวลาที่ปวดข้อมาทั้งวันทั้งคืนมีแม้กระทั่งคนที่เกือบจะพบกับโรคแทรกซ้อนที่เป็นอันตรายของโรคนี้แต่ตอนนี้เดินได้อย่างปกติแล้วเคลื่อนไหวและมีความสะดวกดำรงชีวิตได้อย่างมีความสุขค่ะ
นอกจากจะช่วยรักษาโรคข้อเข่าเสื่อมแล้วเม็ดฟูโบกายังมีประสิทธิภาพในการป้องกันการเสื่อมของกระดูกและลดภาวะของกระดูกในอายุผู้สูงอายุจุดนี้เหมาะมากสำหรับลูกค้าที่เพิ่งผ่านอายุ40 ปีกระดูกและข้อค่อยๆเสื่อมลงหลังจากที่ใช้เม็ดฟูโบกาจะไม่รู้สึกเจ็บเวลาอากาศเปลี่ยนแปลงอีกต่อไปข้อต่อเคลื่อนที่ได้สะดวกไม่มีเสียงดังก๊อกแก๊กที่ข้อเข่าอีกดังนั้นคุณควรใช้โบกาตั้งแต่วันนี้เพื่อหลีกเลี่ยงภาวะแทรกซ้อนในภายหลังอย่าปล่อยให้มันแย่ลงทำให้เกิดความเจ็บปวดโดยไม่จำเป็นและอันตรายผู้ชมทุกท่านครับตอนนี้เม็ดฟูข้อต่อโบกากำลังขายในราคา 1,980 บาทต่อกล่องโดยเฉพาะตัวแทนจำหน่ายได้จัดโปรโมชั่นลดราคาพิเศษ 50% เหลือเพียง 990 บาทต่อกล่อง เมื่อท่านซื้อเม็ดฟูโบกา3 กล่องท่านจะได้รับฟรีโบกาโก1 กล่องชนิดแคปซูลเมื่อท่านซื้อเม็ดฟูโบกา4 กล่องท่านจะได้รับฟรีโบกาโก2 กล่องชนิดแคปซูลครับเพราะฉะนั้นรออะไรครับสั่งเลยวันนี้เพื่อรับโปรโมชั่นพิเศษทุกท่านที่จะสั่งซื้อกรุณาติดต่อสายด่วนที่หน้าจอครับและมั่นใจได้เลยว่าอยู่เบื้องหลังหน้าจอนี้เรามีทีมงานที่จะคอยซัพพอร์ตดูแลในการรับข้อมูลเพื่อแก้ไขปัญหาได้อย่างรวดเร็วและทันทีครับและหากมีข้อสงสัยหรือต้องการสั่งซื้อโปรดติดต่อหมายเลขสายด่วนบนหน้าจอได้ทันทีครับ
เราพร้อมเสมอที่จะช่วยและซัพพอร์ตทุกคนนะคะ
ด้วยการแบ่งปันเบื้องต้นหวังว่าทุกท่านจะมีมุมมองที่เป็นรูปธรรมมากขึ้นเกี่ยวกับเม็ดฟูโบกาเข้าใจส่วนผสมเทคโนโลยีและผลประโยชน์ที่โดดเด่นของผลิตภัณฑ์ครับ
ถึงเวลารายการของเราก็สิ้นสุดลงขอให้ทุกท่านจะมีสุขภาพแข็งแรงมีระบบกระดูกข้อต่อที่ดีและทุกคนอย่าลืมใช้โบกาเพื่อรักษาอาการปวดข้อและให้ร่างกายแข็งแรงและมีการยืดหยุ่นดีค่ะ
From the miners who suck rare metals off the seafloor, to the divers working in America's sea sponge capital, we met people around the world who rely on the sea for their livelihoods.
There could be billions of tons of valuable nodules in the ocean. A Canadian startup called the Metals Company could be the first to cash in. And on this test run, it scooped up the world's biggest haul yet. You're looking at a cargo hold full of clumps of metal that formed over millions of years.
This is history. I've never stood in this. No one has. No one.
The CEO says deep sea mining does less damage than mining on land, though no one really knows for sure yet.
Should we be going to dig up our rainforest to get these metals, or should we be going to this abyssal zone to pick up rocks?
But as the company toasts to a successful pilot mission, environmental activists say deep sea mining is not worth the risks.
We call on you to stop plundering the sea floor.
They say they have leaked video of sediment dumping that proves their point.
In the ground, just keep it in the ground.
Hundreds of experts have called for a pause on this kind of mining until one of the world's most mysterious ecosystems can be studied further.
Please do the science before you go in and destroy.
Can vacuuming billions of rocks from the deep sea really help power a switch to renewable energy? And is this kind of mining actually any better than mining on land? We went aboard the Hidden Gem to see what mining the deep sea really looks like. These rocks are called polymetallic nodules. If you cut one in half, the inside is kind of like a jawbreaker candy. Each one begins with a fragment, like a shark tooth or shell. Over millions of years, metal particles from the water and sediment build up. A layer just a few millimeters thick can take a million years to form. Nodules are found in flat, soft parts of the deep ocean around the world. One of the most promising nodule fields is in the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, a stretch of Pacific Ocean floor about as wide as the continental United States. Nearly 20 companies and countries are racing to launch the deep sea mining industry here. Much of it is reserved for developing nations, so the Metals Company partnered with 3 Pacific Island countries to be able to explore their plots.
How are you? Jared. Nice to meet you.
Gerard Barron is on a decade-long quest to mine the deep. His last venture ran out of money.
I wanted to do something that was near impossible. You know, I was pretty sure that if I didn't do this, then it may not move forward, and that would be a travesty.
He's the CEO of the Metals Company, which in November finished a 10-week trial run, collecting nodules from the deep.
Today marks one of the most important proof points. The technology is available to collect these rocks at a commercial scale.
Here's how it works. The ship lowers a collector vehicle into the water. This prototype weighs 90 tons and is about the size of a minibus.
Copy.
Operators drive the collector remotely from inside this control room.
Yeah, nodules.
Each vehicle has 4 nozzles and sensors that adjust their positions.
They hover just above the seabed, and the nodules that are laying there are sucked into the nozzle. They work kind of like a vacuum cleaner.
The machine also collects the top few centimeters of mud. Internal pumps separate that from the rocks and shoot some of the sediment back out. Next, air bubbles push rocks, mud, and seawater up a tube that can extend up to 2.5 miles. After about 12 minutes, the slurry reaches the surface. A whirlpool uses gravity to separate the nodules from water and sediment. The hidden gem was originally built to drill for oil. The metals company and its engineering partner called Allseas retrofitted it to collect and store nodules. The pile in this hold is the expedition's harvest. The company says it's 3,000 metric tons.
This is the first time a commercial collection of this scale has ever been done.
Many rocks break apart on their way up to the ship.
They are quite brittle, but still the product is very valuable for extraction of nickel, cobalt, copper, and manganese.
Most of the nodules will stay in storage until the company scales up. The metals company's ultimate plan is to build processing centers at ports that will melt and refine the rocks into separate streams of useful metals. The company wants those facilities to be powered on renewable energy and eventually plans to recycle battery metals as well. But first, it needs permission from the International Seabed Authority to scale up mining. Some have criticized that process, saying approval to explore mining in the first place has been rushed and secretive. But the CEO says this mission will provide insights about mining that you can only get by mining.
If you're going to move an industry from an idea into commercial production, you need to do this. All of this data is going to be so important as we build a picture and prepare our finalized environmental impact study.
Researchers hired by the metals company sail alongside the mining ship in this science vessel. They're taking samples before and after harvesting to see how kicking up clouds of sediment or creating lots of noise affects the deep sea environment.
I sometimes hear our critics say, but how can we trust the science if you're paying for it? I say to them, well, who's going to pay for it? If I'm not going to pay for it, I'm sure you're not either.
The company's environmental impact statement based on this mission is expected in the second half of 2023. And one of the main questions is what to do with the water and sediment sucked up with the nodules. The metals company is still testing out the right depth to minimize the impact of sediment clouds, but estimates it's below 1,200 meters. If it's closer to the surface, it can block sunlight to sea life below and spread to a wider area. Activist groups shared these video clips with Insider. They say it shows the hidden gem spilling wastewater onto the surface. The metals company responded with their own video, saying it was a temporary overflow from the whirlpool, which it says ran over the deck and out of these pipes. In an email, the company said the event did not have the potential to cause harm. Insider could not verify whether the videos show the same event. Experts told us loose sediment could impact sea life down below.
These are like the most clear waters probably on the planet. So suddenly dumping a lot of sediment in there that the animals are not used to probably will have some impact. So we actually don't really know how much they can withstand.
Okay, and how many meters are you behind the collector?
24 meters.
A promotional video from the metals company calls this mining area
a vast underwater desert.
But even deserts have life in them, and this stretch of seafloor does too. Many of the species in the dark, high-pressure habitat haven't been found anywhere else on Earth. Recent expeditions have found a never-before-seen octopus, a swarm of eels eating bait, plus sea cucumbers, fish, and stuff we didn't even have a name for yet, like this thing with nearly 7-foot-long tentacles it's attached to a sponge stalk, which is stuck on a nodule. That's a key detail. The rocks seem to give some creatures on the soft seafloor something to hold on to. So no matter how careful the miners are not to stir up sand, removing nodules would take away key habitat and likely kill any animals attached to them.
We can't really predict the scale of species extinctions that would come from that much mining, but there's reason to think it could be significant.
We don't actually know enough yet to understand all these impacts and therefore the costs.
What we do know is that mining metals on land can have devastating effects. The cobalt rush in the Democratic Republic of the Congo has been linked to human rights abuses, including the use of child labor. In Indonesia and the Philippines, nickel mining operations led to the deforestation of tropical areas. But some mines are managed better than others.
People promoting deep-sea mining often argue that all land-based mining is inherently badly managed. And that's not true. There are certainly many cases where it is, but there are certainly many cases where it's not.
Ores mined on land also leave behind lots of leftovers, called tailings. These can leach dangerous pollution into water and soil if not disposed of properly. The CEO believes seafloor mining solves that waste issue and has other benefits too.
We generate zero waste and zero tailings. We don't have the risk of any child labor. We can commercially pick up these rocks and help stop some of the terrible deforestation of our most biodiverse habitats on land.
That would mean replacing some land-based mining with deep-sea mining. But experts say there's no evidence land-based mining would go away or even decline if we mine the seafloor.
You'll just end up with a situation that you are going to have increased ecological harm on land and then at sea as well. Hidden gem, hidden gem, hidden gem.
On November 16th, a Greenpeace campaigner radioed the mining ship at sea to tell the crew his concerns.
Deep sea mining is an imminent threat to the ocean and the vast array of wondrous marine life.
The activist says the environmental benefits the company touts are just marketing spin.
The argument that we need to look for these minerals and metals to aid the green energy transition is pure greenwash. We're not talking about reducing the overall amount of mining. We're talking about already wealthy people looking for a new gold rush.
Ultimately, experts say mining always has trade-offs, no matter where you do it.
There's no question that deep-sea mining would have major environmental impacts, but whether those are acceptable trade-offs is a decision society has to make.
Experts told Insider the best way to make that decision is by starting small.
To start with one mining operation and monitor it very well for at least 10 years. And my personal view is that probably it could sustain one mining operation without having major regional loss of ecosystem services and biodiversity. But people are not talking about one mining operation.
Right now, 22 companies and governments have contracts to explore deep-sea mining in international waters. The metals company says it could begin full-scale operations as soon as 2025. To shift away from fossil fuels, energy experts say we need metals for batteries, solar panels, and wind turbines now.
I don't think deep sea mining would ever be able to be a substantial producer. So the question is that niche, that boutique sort of fraction of the market, is it worth the risk?
The International Energy Agency says that to avoid the worst effects of climate change in coming decades, the world needs to mine at least 4 times as many metals as it does now. Nodules could help with that, but we'll still need a lot of metals from land and a lot more recycling.
By some estimates, about 70% of the natural sea sponges collected globally come from this stretch of Florida's coastline. Generations of residents, many Greek, have built their lives around this foamy sea creature.
I don't know how to do anything else.
Sponge divers here have harvested these animals, yes, they're animals, since the 1900s. but the industry has been struggling recently. Increasingly frequent hurricanes have prevented fishermen from heading out to sea. Some of those storms even killed the sponges. And high fuel costs over the last year have turned some away from working in the industry at all. But sponge diving has faced challenges in the past and has bounced back before. Sponge sales still bring in a couple $1 million a year. But Tarpon Springs has found another way to leverage its storied history.
It supports probably close to $20 million worth of tourism.
We head to Florida's Gulf Coast to find out how sea sponges became such a big business and why divers are fighting to keep their trade alive. Anastasios Charistinos arrived here from Greece in the early 1970s. The 70-year-old now goes by Captain Tasso.
His name is Tasso Charistinos.
Ocean is, I feel like my house, home for me. And we ended up in Tarpon Springs. Greek town, Greek music, Greek restaurants, so I fit into a place.
Sponge diving dates back to ancient Greece. In fact, both Homer and Aristotle wrote about the creatures. Back then, people used them for bathing, cleaning, painting, and decorating, the same as today. When settlers found natural sponge beds in Florida in the 1800s, Greeks began making their way to America, bringing their trade with them. In the olden days, they'd wear suits like this. But nowadays, divers wear wetsuits in the summer and insulating dry suits in the winter, and they strap on scuba masks and shoes.
I've worn anywhere from football cleats to try to basically grip the bottom to run a little faster, to construction boots, to deck boots, to scuba boots.
I use no tools. The only thing I got a knife and cut it off. That's it. Knife.
They plunge as low as 60 feet deep to find the sponges.
Hardly ever it will go over 45, 50, 60 feet maybe.
They walk along the bottom for as long as it takes to fill up one bag.
I just keep looking. I just make a lot of dives. I go down and I look.
In the old days, they used a hook to tear sponges from the bottom. But now, by law, a diver has to cut the sponge with a knife to promote regeneration. One study shows cut sponges have a much better chance of surviving, roughly 30% higher than hooked ones. It's kind of like shearing a sheep or cutting a branch off a tree. Sponges actually show the highest regenerative ability of any animal. Still, Captain Tasso doesn't harvest the smaller ones. He leaves them behind so they can keep growing.
They have to be 5 inches and up.
They haul their full net up to the boat and make their way back to shore.
Eh? Nella isabula mesa e giù
On the docks, Tasso and his team get to work, separating and cleaning the sponges.
The price of the sponges depends on the size of the sponges and the quality.
Wool sponges are the most valuable, going for about $15 each. They're the softest and they hold a lot of water. Yellows are more coarse. They're also the cheapest. As the fishermen sort the sponges, they give them the first of many cleanings. Then they trim them to get rid of any discolorations and to shape them.
That's the reason I'm wearing the gloves, because sponges like a fine sandpaper, they wear you out, you know, the fingerprints disappear, see? Just like glass. I almost dropped my coffee cup this morning, you know?
Overnight, Captain Tasso leaves his clean sponges out to dry. Some people stop by to ask questions or buy straight from the harvesters on the docks, but Tasso says the best option is finding a wholesale buyer. The sponges find themselves, or rather a piece of themselves, at a processing plant, like this one, about 1.5 miles from the docks. Sponges get soaked in the wetting area and pushed down into a bath with a wooden paddle. Then they're drained in this net and transferred to a water extractor, where they're spun to remove excess water, leaving the sponges damp and ready for the next stage, cutting. The worker protects his fingers from this sharp wire with gloves.
These are sponges that are netted up for processing. We'll put them in the bath tonight and they'll sit there overnight and then be processed from there.
Harry Barber manages the plant at Armley Sponge Company. The Armley family founded the company in the Bahamas in 1908 and expanded into Florida about 50 years ago. They opened their Tarpon Springs processing plant in 2018. Into the washing machine they go. Next, time to dry and get sorted by size. They box the sponges and prepare them for shipment.
Bath sponges have taken off tremendously because people want to use something on their children that's sustainable and, clean and natural.
Despite the sponge's near magical ability to regenerate, it was almost wiped out here in the late 1930s by a mysterious disease. And then again in the 40s and 50s, out-of-control algae called red tides killed many local sponge beds. The population survived against all odds and thrived during the industry's heyday in the 1980s, when around 30 sponge boats and 50 divers docked here every day.
There was a blight of sponges in the Mediterranean, and we were able to harvest here locally at higher prices and ship stuff over to the Mediterranean.
But when the Mediterranean fisheries recovered, the demand and the price went down again in Tarpon Springs. Many fishermen went out of business, but some, like Captain Tasso, stuck it out.
And I don't know how to do anything else.
2022 hasn't proven much easier. With record inflation and fuel prices, maintaining and gassing up a boat is expensive. And the industry is facing another problem. Hurricanes are happening more and more because of the climate crisis, so bad years are becoming the norm. Divers can't go out during storms, but there's something else. Even though sponges are technically animals, they survive by attaching themselves to the ocean floor. During a hurricane, many get smothered by sand or hit by tumbling rocks and die. Lately, only a handful of sponge boats and about a dozen divers go out any given day.
You just have to look harder because it's not everywhere general like used to be. A red tide kill them, but some survivors here or there.
Captain Tasso works long days.
I work all my life. I grew up in a family, 12 kids. My father take me up 4 o'clock in the morning, working all day long. I can work 24 hours non-stop.
Handling his sponges the whole time.
From the time you pick the sponge on the bottom, that's the first time you touch it. By the time you sell it, you have touched the same sponge at least 20 more times.
Armley mostly buys from independent contractors like Tasso.
We purchase from them based on what they bring in and the conditions and sizes of what they have.
So the income isn't guaranteed. Sponger Muhip Goktepe goes on these long fishing trips year-round. He makes about $46,000 a year.
If you bring sponges, it's gonna be good year. You don't bring him, no good year. Sometimes hurricane, tropical storm, you don't work.
Some years you work more and you make more. Some years less and you make less. Depends how much time you're going out there, that's all.
In addition to the financial uncertainty, diving can be dangerous if your hose gets cut or you dive too deep. That's why Muhip and Tasso aren't trying to pass down a family business.
Well, cut my air hose a couple of times and I ran out of air and I have to swim up. That's a dangerous stuff.
I don't want my kids or my grandkids to do this job. They can do better, you know what I mean?
There's not much money into it. Nobody wants to go get beat up out there for 20 days. People prefer to be in the land. I ain't gonna push my grandkids to this job. I don't want them to do that. They're doing good in the school.
It is sad to see so few fishing, but I certainly understand it. The markets right now won't bear really high prices to offset the cost of fuel. Maintenance on boats is expensive. We're looking at a country and a world that's trying to look at natural products.
So until the industry can rejuvenate itself, Tarpon Springs will have to rely on its tourism. Visitors pour tens of millions of dollars into the community every year, eating authentic Greek food and taking boat tours. They also shop for sponge souvenirs to take home. But many locals wonder if tourism will be the long-term solution, and if it's not, what's next for the upcoming generation of spongers?
In 2012, a teenager came up with an ambitious plan to eliminate plastic in the ocean. Boy and Slat wanted to harness natural currents to collect floating debris inside a giant U-shaped barrier.
I believe the Great Pacific Garbage Patch can completely clean itself in just 5 years.
That timeline didn't work out. And there's still a garbage truck's worth of plastic entering the ocean every minute on average. But the ocean cleanup has made progress. The nonprofit has removed more than 200 metric tons of trash from the Pacific.
Many people said that it couldn't be done, that it was a fool's errand, a pipe dream.
But to really make a dent in plastic pollution, the organization's going closer to the source. Most ocean plastic comes from rivers. So the Dutch entrepreneur invented these big machines that capture waste before it ever makes it to open waters.
Rivers are the arteries that carry the trash from land to sea.
They're called interceptors, and the founder plans to deploy 1,000 of them. But some experts worry these machines could strip rivers and oceans of things that are supposed to be there too. So, can a network of trash barriers clean the world's most polluted rivers? And are cleaner rivers the key to a plastic-free ocean? The Rio Osama in the Dominican Republic flows into the Caribbean Sea. It's one of the dirtiest rivers in the world, and Carmen Encarnacion has lived nearby for 24 years.
Nos afecta emocionalmente, es decir, nos afecta de toda la manera.
The ocean cleanup installed an interceptor about a mile down the river from her home in 2020.
El río está más limpio, ahí se siente menos contaminación.
The idea is to let the current do most of the work. As trash travels downstream, this 700-foot-long arm redirects it toward the machine's opening.
So what the barriers do is they let the water pass, but they stop everything that's floating. On the roof, we have these solar panels that are connected to batteries, which store the energy so that even at night we can keep intercepting plastic.
Conveyor belts carry the waste to one of 6 dumpsters. They can fill up in just 3 days during the rainy season. A lot of today's haul is plants. And in this case, that's probably not a bad thing. These are invasive water hyacinths. They grow naturally in the Amazon, but over the past century, humans have introduced them to new places where they don't have any predators. Like the Osama River, where they're taking over, blocking light and oxygen and killing plants and animals beneath them. The plant tends to thrive in polluted water, and its roots cling to trash.
Todos esos desechos tóxicos que botan se quedan enredados en esa planta.
Nearby factories and farms have used this river as a dumping ground for decades. But in Santo Domingo, many people who live on the Osama's banks depend on it for drinking water. A lot of them also have limited options for dealing with waste.
It has to do with urban planning, and if these communities here don't have the access roads for the trucks to come in.
So some locals dump their trash in drainage ditches called cañadas.
So right behind me we have the Cañada Bonavides. It's one of the worst cañadas we have here in the Osama River. Just like the rivers are the arteries that take the plastic to the ocean, these cañadas here are the arteries that take the plastic to the river.
The ocean cleanup estimates the Osama carries up to 22,000 metric tons of plastic into the Caribbean Sea each year. The nonprofit has 10 other interceptors in rivers around the globe. The devices can't remove all types of pollution, like chemicals or plastic that doesn't float. And until residents have more options for dealing with trash, it'll keep ending up in the Osama.
We rely heavily on working with local partners, such as the Dominican Navy here or the UNDP, precisely to work on this upstream problem.
The Navy handles day-to-day operations for the river cleaner. And it works with the national government to manually collect trash that slips by the interceptor.
They have proven to be the perfect partners for us. By the end of the year, they should be owning the interceptor.
Once that happens, the ocean cleanup will shift its focus to other rivers. Like the Rio Motagua in Guatemala, which the nonprofit says might have more plastic than any other in the world.
In Guatemala, there's so much trash coming down the river that these machines would be filled within a few seconds. So there, again, we have a different type of interceptor.
The nonprofit built an interceptor fence to catch plastic in a flash flood zone that flows into the river.
Every river is unique. You really need to adapt it to the specific circumstances of that river.
The fence lets some plastics through, but Boyne expects to have an updated interceptor by the end of 2023. Meanwhile, the founder hasn't given up on his initial dream, cleaning the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. He founded the Ocean Cleanup in 2013, and a decade later, the patch is still growing. One challenge is that it isn't really a patch. It's actually two swirling clouds of debris, which often aren't visible on the surface. Natural currents have created 5 whirlpools like it around the world, called gyres, and each one collects trash. The nonprofit is working on cleaning up the North Pacific Gyre using this thing. It's a flexible barrier stretched between 2 ships, with a shallow screen hanging off. The idea is to consolidate floated plastic, making it easier to collect about once a week. The Ocean Cleanup says in total it's removed more than 200 metric tons of plastic from the Pacific Gyre. Yet it's only about 0.2% of all the plastic that might be floating here. The team is working on a system 3 times bigger than this one, which should be ready sometime in 2023. Some researchers worry these cleaning machines can disrupt ecosystems by scooping up living things along with trash. The Ocean Cleanup says the screen creates a downward flow that carries living creatures under it. But the system still catches some fish, crabs, barnacles, and other animals. The nonprofit says it's continually fine-tuning the device to try to keep creatures out, but it's impossible to avoid them completely. That's partially because sea life is all mixed up with the plastic and can even live right on it.
Sea urchins, sea stars, pretty much anything that you can imagine, you can also find on these plastic floats. There's a lot of organisms that also attach their eggs to these floating plastics.
Some critics say the whole idea of passively harvesting plastic is risky.
Once it is in the ocean, it is connected with marine life. It's too late to remove it.
A potential alternative is targeting clusters of trash instead of sweeping the whole gyre.
Plastic in the open ocean tends to form these plastic dust bunnies at sea. Collecting the plastic debris is also pretty easy once it's clumped into these dust bunnies, because then you have a single targeted area with an extremely high amount of plastic.
Those clumps are mostly fishing gear, which does the most damage.
By focusing on things like ghost gear, which are really, really dangerous to marine life, you're collecting the most harmful plastic out of the ocean, not necessarily collecting some of the less harmful plastic, things like laundry baskets or buckets, which may have a lot of life growing on them.
The Ocean Cleanup says that in the long run, its ocean systems will be more scalable than manual cleaning. When it comes to its river cleanup, experts were more optimistic.
I loved it in the diagrams, how it sort of funnels it in. I was like, that is so perfect. Once it's in the ocean, it's a problem that really becomes much harder to manage.
That tracks with Boyne's results. As of April 2023, his team has collected more than 10 times as much plastic from rivers as from the ocean. In Santo Domingo, members of the Dominican Navy empty the dumpsters and send the haul to the Duquesa landfill.
Of course, landfill is not ideal, but at least it's 1,000,000 times better than it flowing into the ocean.
Boyne says the river plastics can't be recycled as easily as the ones from the ocean.
It's much more of a mix, and also it's much more polluted. So you have sewage water that's often in these rivers.
Ultimately, restoring a polluted ecosystem requires big changes. The best way to keep plastic out of rivers and oceans is to make less of it.
Everybody can do something, but we also need the companies to do their part. This needs to be a collaboration between all sectors of society.
In the meantime, Carmen does what she can to clean up her own neighborhood. In her free time, she collects water hyacinths and transforms them into art.
La teníamos ahí mismo y no sabíamos qué hacer con ella. Y eso me motivó a ir desenvolviendo, a ver la curiosidad de qué tipo de cosas se podían hacer con ella.
She dries the plant and weaves it into hats, bags, and more.
Hay muchos tipos de decoraciones y ahí podemos portar con lo que es eliminando la contaminación.
Much like plastic, the plant can be useful, but Carmen still wants to see it gone.
Entonces, si la humanidad no se une y coopera con lo que es el reciclaje, va a seguir lo que es la contaminación.
Royal Caribbean's Symphony of the Seas is like a giant floating city. And its residents, over 6,000 passengers a week. It can cost over $1 million a day to keep it all running, even though each cruiser pays as little as $100 daily. So to make a profit, the cruise line and all its crew have to be really efficient. It takes a staff of 2,400 people hustling to keep it all operating smoothly.
So we cover day and night productions.
The team moves supplies along secret crew member-only areas of the ship. From cramped ship kitchens, chefs pump out 30,000 meals every single day.
Very, very good. So this is what we do.
A bustling trash room handles all the waste, and the captain's bridge keeps the ship moving safely.
Like, wow, it's really crazy. The productions are super massive.
We go behind the scenes to see what it takes to sail one of the world's largest cruise ships. Symphony of the Seas was the globe's biggest ship for 4 years running. In 2022, the Wonder of the Seas took the title, beating out its older sister because it's slightly heavier. Back in late 2019, we boarded Symphony for a week to film all the happenings inside. The voyage started on a Saturday. This is turnaround day. Passengers disembark so new ones can board.
We don't get people in and out gradually, we just do everything at once.
And every room is turned over.
As you may imagine, it's a big job to clean 2,759 rooms.
On turnaround day, trucks carrying 500 pallets of new inventory arrive at the Port of Miami, the busiest cruising port in the world. Among these provisions, over 600,000 pounds of food and beverages that get loaded on to Deck 2.
This is basically a place that you would not like to be on turnaround day when we are loading. It's busy, busy, super busy.
It's estimated the top 3 cruise lines in the world will spend an estimated $2.3 billion on food and drink in 2023. Supplies have to be perfectly planned for this 7-day cruise.
Our ability to manage the things with our own resources needs to be much bigger than in a hotel where at sea there's no option.
And all this has to be loaded onto the ship in just 9 hours.
Any delay in our operation can hamper the sail away of the ship, which is again a big logistic requirement.
By 4:30, the ship is ready to set sail. Moving the ship is a combined effort between the bridge and the engine control room. The bridge handles steering and navigating.
Maybe only 10% of my job is being on the bridge, having control of the ship. The rest of it, I'm managing a huge, huge operation.
And the engine room provides the power.
I always say that when there's a problem on board, the captain calls me, I never call the captain.
4 bow thrusters move the front of the ship side to side, and 3 electric azipod propellers turn 360 degrees to pull the ship instead of push it. 6 giant engines power it all.
We have everybody on board. Then he will request to have propulsion and start the thrusters and get ready for departure. So the engines are almost ready. So we have 1 and 6 online.
Now Captain Sullivan can maneuver out of the port.
Here we are on the bridge in the cockpit. This is where we do the navigation at sea. We've got multiple displays giving us information about the ship, what the course, the speed, the heading is. We have an electronic chart display with our routes already planned, and we can see exactly where we are at any time.
Symphony of the Seas is registered and sails under the flag of the Bahamas. Because of the Passenger Services Act of 1886, no foreign flag ships can move passengers between 2 U.S. ports. To avoid the $200 per passenger fine, any Royal Caribbean ship leaving the U.S. has to stop at another country. Since this cruise is headed to Puerto Rico from Miami, they had to slip St. Martin and the Bahamas into the itinerary. On the other side of the ship, passengers are getting settled into their rooms. Ocean View cabins started $1,000 per person for the week, going up to $85,000 for the tricked-out Ultimate Family Suite.
We have a room for every wallet on this ship. Everything good? Amazing, huh?
Meaning hotel manager Fernando Jorge has to cater to all kinds of tastes.
If you put this jacket on with 4 stripes, you'll be a celebrity too.
Cruise lines bank on the fact that they have a captive audience for a week. They make their profit from keeping passengers moving through the ship, dropping cash on onboard purchases, like alcohol, casino games, and specialty restaurants. Fernando says the ship's design helps. On conventional cruise ships, there's only one block with a big pool in the middle. This ship has 7 distinct neighborhoods with their own themes and activities. A big central park sits in the middle, and 17 public and private pools and hot tubs dot the rest of the ship. The average cost to build a new ship is $650 million. Royal Caribbean spent more than double that on the Symphony of the Seas. Fernando's goal is to control how passengers move through the ship, from their rooms to shows to dining halls, so no one part is too overcrowded.
They move around freely to their own will and doing what they want, but we, up to a certain extent, the flow is designed that at any given point you do not feel that you are with another 6,500 people on board.
The ship's design also helps in isolating zones in case of an emergency and controlling COVID-19. Passengers that test positive for COVID can be quarantined down on Deck 3.
So this is a COVID quarantine. You guys on Deck 3. Thing is, they leave these disinfectant bottles. All our trash in these biohazard bags. Our meals, our room service, anything like that, we put it in those bags. Hand sanitizer, masks. When you have COVID, they send you to the cabin. Room service is pretty much complimentary, so they are not directly handing you the food. They're putting it down and then you pick it up and stuff like that.
In December 2021, 50 people on board tested positive for COVID. They were able to isolate in their cabins. Every crew member is trained on COVID procedures and sailing safety. Royal Caribbean is incorporated in Liberia. Labor laws there are a lot looser than in mainland United States or Europe. It allows Royal Caribbean to hire a crew from all over the world and keep them working long hours for 3 to 12-month contracts. Half of the staff is part of Fernando's culinary team. Their job? Feeding all those passengers their 3, 4, 8 meals a day.
You have to calculate that it's breakfast, lunch, and dinner, plus snacks, plus at night, plus all 24-hour food all around, and that never stops.
Ship kitchens run 24/7, manned by a culinary team of more than 1,000 people. They dish out over 30,000 meals every single day, and they do it all from compact kitchens on a rocking ship. So how does all this food make it to the plate? Jared's in charge of ordering all the food for the ship's 23 different restaurants. Every week, Jared's got a $1 million shopping budget. All of that is just for 7 days of food. Sometimes Jared will tweak his orders based on who's coming aboard. More kids means more chicken fingers.
That's how the operation runs. So we monitor it on a daily basis, what has been used, what has not been used, and then we adjust our orders accordingly. But by and large, being in Miami, having the same number of people, it's almost the same every cruise.
Once on board, everything is moved along the ship's secret highway. This is I-95, and it runs the entire length of the ship, on Deck 2.
We separate all the stores to the different locations that they are supposed to go. We have about 20 different storerooms divided into freezers, fridges, walk-in fridges, and dry stores.
Seafood, meat, vegetables, and fruit are all divided and stored in separate fridges.
If you come towards the end of the cruise, this box will be almost empty with a few fruits that are needed for 2 more days, which we keep as backup stock.
There are also 6 freezers. That's where the 700 pounds of ice cream that'll be eaten each week are stored. Dry goods are stored down on Deck 1.
Full of spices, full of chocolate in this storeroom. Coffee. It's nice to be in this storeroom.
An elevator gets the food downstairs. Jared's team checks all of the food for quality control every day. If produce is ripening faster than expected, they try to work it into another meal. For example, overripe broccoli could go into broccoli cheddar soup instead of being tossed. Once inventory is stored, restaurants on upper decks put in food orders with Jared. Chefs will come downstairs, pick up their order, and cart it away to be cooked. That's where this guy comes in.
Any food on board this beautiful ship, anything you eat it, is my responsibility. Wherever you have beautiful potato fry, it's mine. Rice is mine. Pate is mine. Pastry is mine. Salad, shrimp. Wherever you eat it, is my responsibility.
Rijo's team of 280 chefs run the kitchens 24/7. Each chef works 10 to 12-hour days. Contracts typically last 4 months without a single day off.
Some of the people start working for 8 o'clock in the morning, all the way to 2 o'clock, take a break, come back again 5 o'clock, finish by 9:30. Then another group start working 10 o'clock in the night, all the way to 10 o'clock in the morning. So we cover day and night productions.
Chefs on board cook up nearly 100 different menus every week. All the menus are developed at Royal Caribbean's Miami headquarters. And every week, chefs stick to the same rotation of menus, cooking up everything from racks of lamb to hand-rolled sushi. The food has to be diverse to match Symphony of the Sea's international passengers, vacationing at all kinds of price points.
We try to please everybody and to make sure that everybody find what you're looking for.
All the cooking happens in 36 kitchens, or galleys as they're called on a ship. There are 12 specialty restaurants on board, costing up to $50 a person. And each of those restaurants has its own small galley. In those tight quarters, chefs crank out the same menu every day. At Jamie's Italian, it's fresh pasta. At Hooked, it's over 2,000 oysters, shucked per cruise. But the largest amount of food is reserved for the main dining room, which spans 3 decks and serves up to 6,000 people a night. Eating here is included in your ticket. Before food heads up to the main galleys, it starts in one of the prep kitchens, off I-95. There's a butcher shop.
Butcher, good morning.
Yes, sir.
These are the gentlemen looking after all the meat cuts.
The butcher goes through about 15,000 pounds of beef and 9,700 pounds of chicken each week. There's also a veggie cutting room and a fish thawing box. Lobster is the most popular dish in main dining. The ship goes through about 2,100 pounds of lobster tails every week. Finally, the food heads upstairs to the main galley. The ship's biggest kitchen is broken down by categories: desserts, bread, cold food, and hot food. In dessert, chefs whip up cakes, chocolates, and 100 different types of pastries. Over in the bread bakery, they make 40 different kinds of bread from all over the world, all from scratch. But the real hustle comes just before the dinner rush. 6,000 hungry passengers in the main dining room. Remember Rijo? Before dinner prep starts, he has to approve all the dishes.
Good afternoon. How are you, Chef? Good.
Rijo tries each dish and gives his critiques.
We're gonna put a little bit more ferno, a little bit more gale, a little bit more herbs. Very, very good. So this is what we're looking for. Aioli. Aioli, we need to put a little bit more for today. Huh? You can see, Chef, how we look. Huh? Take a note, don't forget. Huh? That's what we're talking about, right? Beautiful, beautiful. We don't have any challenge, so we're ready to go. That's great. Yes, sir. Chef, thank you so much, and thank you so much, and look forward to have a beautiful night tonight. Thank you. Have a beautiful day. Bye-bye.
Chefs take his notes and get cooking. Chefs can see a tally of each dish ordered up on screens. The system also keeps track of how much inventory is used. In the cold room, salads and appetizers like carpaccio come together. In the hot room, chefs dish out soups, sauces, sides, and mains.
We have 2 kinds of chefs. Chefs working here on the line, which is close to me, plating up, and chefs on the stove cooking. So everything we do is in batch cooking. So basically, we grill a steak there, we pass it over to the pass. The person on the pass is plating it up to the requested temperature. That means always that the guests are getting fresh food, and from an operational point, we don't have any overproduction.
Finally, waiters deliver those dishes to hungry passengers out in main dining. Between the chefs, inventory crew, waiters, and dishwashers, it takes a team of 1,085 people to keep this massive operation going. Together, they cook nearly 11 million meals each year, and they're doing it all on a moving ship.
The ship is rocking, then all the equipment is built to the ship rocket. Then in whatever moment, maybe the ship moves, somebody don't put one brake in one trolley, and you see the trolley flying away. And happen. That's why all the cooks always be the attention with that.
But if crew members are doing their job right, passengers won't even know any of it's happening. They'll just get back to eating their 8th meal of the day. What happens to all that leftover food and other waste on the ship? Well, it's handled by the ship's waste management team. But there aren't any garbage trucks here to scoop it up and take it away. We're at sea, obviously. And since waste can't, and shouldn't, just be dumped in the ocean, well, what do cruise ships do with all of it? This is something the industry's been dealing with for years.
Carnival Cruise Line is coming clean about polluting oceans.
Princess Cruises was fined $40 million in 2016 for illegal dumping, and Carnival got hit with a $20 million fine in 2019 for disposing of plastic waste in the ocean.
Carnival Corporation's issues really brought the need for better technology so that these ships can operate more efficiently.
Cruise lines have been working on systems to purify water and deal with waste inside ships.
Up until now, these types of options weren't available.
All this tech was custom built for the Symphony of the Seas. The company says it's a zero landfill ship, which means it uses everything from recycling to water filtration to deal with its own waste. And this guy is in charge of making sure no single water bottle is unaccounted for.
Welcome to Waste and Recycling Center.
We're down on deck 2, that secret crew-only area of the ship. Crew members check all the ship's trash cans for recyclables and bring them down here for Alex's team to handle. Despite being the only waste facility on this massive ship, it's surprisingly quiet. Alex said the busiest time is in the morning, when things are unpackaged for the day.
This is the waste streams that we have. Every waste stream has its own way of handling it.
There are separate teams to deal with each incoming recyclable: glass, cardboard, plastic, and metal.
This is our incinerator room. So we have 2 incinerators, 1 and 2. This area is manned 24 hours a day. We have 10 crew members who are working here, 5 in the morning and 5 in the evening.
Crew members separate glass into colors: green, brown, and white.
See, this is the byproduct of it after we crush it.
They can process upwards of 13,000 pounds of glass for a week-long cruise. All the small glass pieces are stored in bins until the ship docks. Plastic goes through this massive compactor. Even though the ship's gotten rid of plastic straws, it still relies on bottled water, because for health and safety reasons, no cruise ship is allowed to have water fountains. So every week, they crush about 528 gallons of water bottles.
We are compacting the cardboard over there.
Throughout the day, cardboard is stacked up in this machine, called a baler. Once it's full, it's all compressed into bundles. And used aluminum cans, well, they're sent through this baler. The machine squeezes them down into big cubes, which are then stored in a fridge just off the waste room.
This area is actually for the items that can produce smell, the garbage.
And that smell could get pretty bad. The waste is stored for up to 7 days at a time, until the ship docks back in Miami, where all the plastic, aluminum, paper, and glass go to recycling partner facilities. In 2018, Royal Caribbean recycled 43.7 million pounds of waste. And any rebates earned from these recycling programs go back to the Employee Retirement Fund. The cruise line is hoping that it's a nice incentive for employees to bring recycling down from their own crew cabins. So what about things that can't get recycled? For example, food. Every week, the ship loads up 600,000 pounds of provisions. But for the food that's not eaten, well, the company had to figure out how to get rid of all of that, too. Each one of the ship's restaurants and 36 kitchens has its own suction drain. Chefs and waiters keep food scraps in separate buckets. Then, once they've gotten enough, they place it all in this special drain. All the food waste ends up in one big pipe that runs through the entire ship. And that pipe leads to what's known as the hydroprocessor.
Those pipes over there, so these were the food waste is passing through. This is being processed through here.
This machine has a bunch of tiny layers of mesh to break down the food.
It's being stored in our tank. We have 2 tanks of comminuted food waste.
And the final step, incineration. Now let's talk about your toilet waste. Yep, we're gonna go there. It's all part of the water treatment system on board, controlled from the engineering room.
All the wastewater that we are generating on board the ship is being collected. Nothing goes overboard unless we have run it through a treatment plant.
Water is divided into 2 categories: gray water, from sinks, laundries, and drains, and black water. That includes everything from the galleys and your toilets, including your urine.
This is then being mixed together and run through the advanced wastewater purification plant.
The purification system purifies the water to a point above the US federal standard, which is almost safe to drink.
And then it runs